welcome to another episode of the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast. My name is Matt Welch, being joined by Devin, Hasson, and David Wolman. It is 1:45 on a Wednesday. We are recording this in anticipation of Week 2 of high school football for 5A and 6A. Yeah, we've already had a couple games fall through, so that is very apt, knocking on wood. But yes, nevertheless, as has been the case, we're here to preview some of the marquee games on our coverage schedule, including the reader-voted Game of the Week. Big thanks to everybody who went to the website, starlocalmedia.com, to vote on one of the 5 games that were up for contention this week. Once again, another week where there wasn't a whole lot of suspense as far as what was the...
pretty big margin on this one.
Yes, this one was a big one. For this one, we were headed out to Eagle Stadium in Allen. It was only a matter of time before Allen wound up in the spot of the podcast. But yes, a Friday, 7 o'clock kickoff between Allen and Atascocita, a first-time matchup. Just to kind of set the stage for this one, this is a meeting of Eagles, so that's going to make the game story a bit of a pain to write because you can't use the term Eagles since it applies to both. So, I don't know, do you guys ever run into that when you guys have to cover two teams that have the same mascot writing afterwards? It's just, I don't know, it feels like more of a challenge.
Oh, yeah, and it's especially, obviously Eagles is Rowlettes. I run into that quite a bit with them. Mustangs, you run into it quite a bit. I got some unique ones, too. Skeeters you don't run into very often, or if at all. But, yeah, it does because you kind of get into a habit where once you use Allen, the next reference you use Eagles, and you kind of rotate the two, and yeah, it does. You have to go back and double check your work. I mean, it sounds like a trivial problem for to many out there, but
the listener
it is a pain. It is a pain.
These are first world journalist problems. This was a matchup between two teams. Again, the first time meeting this was actually already on Allen's schedule prior to the pandemic, so this was going to happen, either way. This was initially set up though through a back channel. Some folks with the Tom Landry Classic helped kind of lay the groundwork for these two schools getting in touch, and it's kind of been a bit of a tradition in recent years for Allen to host a team not from the Dallas area, either in that first or second week of their non-district schedule. You've seen obviously a handful of teams out of state coming in to play at Eagle Stadium. Then last year you had a team not from the Dallas area but from a bit further south with Dickinson coming to town, and then kind of that same vein. Always nice when a Dallas area power and a Houston area power hook up. So that's certainly going to be one of the prominent storylines in this matchup. They're both ranked in the state's top 15, top 16 as far as the preseason polls go. So this is the first of 2 straight weeks of state-ranked opponents for Allen. So after they took care of Plano East last week, 49-26, we're going to get to learn over these next couple weeks a bit more as far as what Allen is, just from the usual lofty standard that they're held to. And for Atascocita, they've been. I mean, this is when you think of Houston area football, the first program that kind of comes to mind is North Shore with what they've done. Obviously, being the 2-time defending state champions and whatnot, ranked number 1 in the state. Not far off though is a program like Atascocita. They haven't necessarily broken through as far as that championship contention, plateau goes, but this is a program that's won double-digit games each of the past 5 seasons. Each of those years resulted in a playoff run that went at least 3 rounds deep. Honestly, just off that alone, name me the teams at the 6A level that have gone at least 3 rounds deep each of the last 5 years. It's not a long list at all.
Well, they've only been around since 2006.
Yeah.
So, it takes, especially at the 6A level, it takes some time to grow that program. But like you say, that's certain times you have a great team, they just get stuck in a tough region. And when you're trying to go through North Shore, you can say the same thing with the Region 2 with Allen, or Regional 1 with Allen, depending on what 2 years it is. It's just tough when you have that kind of one hump you can't get over. But like you say, 3 trips to the regional finals and 10 wins or more in 6 of the last 7 years. So they've established themselves in the last decade as one of the elite. And that you mentioned the Allen scheduling, going out of state, going down to the Houston area. Well, part of that is because no one around here wants to play them early this season. Once you hit that status, you really are kind of only left with the other elite teams around the state because, they're not just going to play anybody. They may for a rivalry standpoint. It makes sense to play a Plano East early on because they have that history. But, that's why things like the Tom Landry Classic kind of came about, was to put kind of these super heavyweights together. And in recent years, Allen's kind of had to look to fill that non-district schedule. They've had to go elsewhere. And at Atascocita, obviously, they think they think they're on that level. They want that challenge, and it should be an interesting matchup. I know this is one that you've looked at more intently than anybody else, having this on your schedule.
It's certainly a nice chance as far as a potential validation game for a program like Atascocita, which, as you said, is still a program that's in its relative infancy compared to a program like Allen that's won 5 state titles since 2008 and has amassed one of the most prolific runs of any high school in recent Texas high school football history. I believe they're entering this game looking to win their 77th consecutive regular season game, which I think might be closing in on the state record. It's not too far off for sure. So as far as kind of where these, how these two teams got together, with Atascocita, they're coming off a 12-2 season last year, an appearance in the regional finals. It's a team that's a little low on returning experience, though. They only bring back 5 starters, just 2 on offense. They're going to be fairly new at quarterback with Gavin Session. He's just a junior. He's got plenty of talent, though, to spread the ball around, too.
Landon King?
Yes.
Auburn commit, I think he is.
Yes, Landon King, a big time target at tight end. He's 6'5", like as you said, David. He's committed to Auburn, one of the top tight ends in the state. Keith Wheeler was the district newcomer of the year last season, just a sophomore last year. As a wide receiver, he really shined a lot. Their offensive line is really, really young, but they do have one of the pound for pound top offensive linemen in the entire state at left tackle in Cam Dewberry, who's he's the number 3 offensive line prospect for the class of 2022. He's got offers from everywhere. So that's again, while you're pretty young elsewhere, that's certainly a nice little ace up your sleeve to have with one of the, especially a tackle for sure. The defense is there's a little inexperience as well, just 3 returning starters there, but they are pretty solid in the secondary. Caleb Burton was an all-district pick for them last year. Benny Qualls flashed some promises, just a sophomore last season. Up front, they've got some Coach Gamble with Allen was really, really complimentary of their size on both sides of the ball. Up front with Nico Campbell, and then they have a sophomore who is 6'2". I'm not going to try to pronounce his last name, so just going to say Samu. It's the first name. There's a lot of vowels in that last name, but yeah, no, he's 6'2", 350 pounds or so is what he was listed on the interwebs. Nico Campbell 6'3". They got some huge defensive linemen, so it's definitely a program that on paper, Coach Gamble was just all across the board, just their athleticism causes so many problems for teams. And but the big question is for Atascocita, this is their first game, so Allen has a little bit of a head start in that sense. They were able to get in their game last week against Plano East. So how much does that impact things, when you're traveling on the road into a place like Eagle Stadium, which to be fair is not going to be like typical Eagle Stadium at this time of year because of the
socially distanced Eagle Stadium.
Yes, a very socially distanced Eagle Stadium because of the COVID restrictions. So you're not getting that basically that college style atmosphere that a lot of Allen home games will have, which can be overwhelming for teams if you've never really been in too many settings like that. But nevertheless, though, it's certainly for a program that's playing its first game, that's a tall order when you have to put everything out there into practice for the very first time against, not just a team that has a game up on you in terms of preparation, but also a team like Allen that is about as credentialed as anyone in the state.
Especially against an Allen team that, they scored on 6 consecutive drives last week, so you don't have that game experience for Atascocita right there.
Yeah.
So, to replicate that game experience against a powerful offense that Allen could be this year, that's tough.
Yeah, Allen's offense, there's a lot of buzz surrounding this offense. Their skill positions are just stocked with talent, as is typically the case with Allen. There were some questions, though, as to what was going to happen at quarterback. They had a couple candidates in place there to take over for Raylan Sharp from last season. Yeah, they found a couple answers, actually. They put to use some, I think, actually, 4 kids wound up attempting passes for them last week. Obviously, the starter, though, was, as has kind of been evidenced, leading up to the start of the season, General Booty, transfer from the California area. He was strong in his debut. He went 9 of 14, 160 yards, 2 touchdowns. They did, kind of mix in just to kind of build depth, because you're always curious when you see a team go to the backup quarterback at some time in the first half. You understand, if it's in the late third quarter, the game you're already up by 5-6 touchdowns, and you start siphoning in the backups. But they gave Jake Wolf, one of the backups, some pretty meaningful snaps in that game against Plano East. And again, the reps, he only attempted 8 passes, but very productive, 167 yards on a touchdown. It helps when you have receivers like Blaine and Bryson Green to throw to, who are currently sitting at over 30 yards per catch for both of them. Blaine was his usual dominant self, 4 catches, 138 yards, 2 touchdowns, right around 35 yards per catch. And then Bryson Green, 2 catches, 61 yards and a touchdown. It's what you've kind of come to know out of those two, and that they can attack you at every level of the defense, whether it's them catching a screen pass and just barreling through the secondary. They're built like a couple linebackers, and their ability to stretch the field and then just rack up those big receptions. It's just kind of been the blueprint to Allen's offense in recent years. And then you've got the running game, which was its usual efficient self. Jordan Johnson picked up right where he left off, averaging 9.5 yards per carry, scored a touchdown. Jalen Jenkins gave them some good reps in relief. That's kind of what the bar is for Allen's offense this season. As long as they can kind of steady things at the quarterback spot. Defensively, Coach Gamble wasn't the biggest fan of some of the penalties and the big plays that they gave up against Plano East. But you look around there, it's a bunch of guys who were kind of getting their first serious reps and starting roles. Guys like Levi Tupou, who's had a couple brothers come through the program over the years. He had 9 tackles. Alexander Green and Cade Patton had strong games in the secondary. Patton in particular had a interception and a couple pass breakups. He's technically the only returning starter for Allen's defense. So it's still a unit that's kind of like Atascocita, in that it's pretty not exactly the most seasoned unit, but one that as the season goes along and you start getting more comfortable will hopefully assume the identity of defenses in the past. What is something that you guys are going to kind of have your eye on in this matchup?
I'm going to see how Allen's defense handles Atascocita's skill positions. Obviously, Allen has their skill position, so I'm going to see, Allen doesn't really have much game film on Atascocita at all. No. So, it's going to be, a little chess matchup especially in the first half to figure out what Atascocita is going to do. The same vice versa. They're a Houston school, so they don't see Allen hardly at all, even on highlights. So, it's going to be a little bit of a chess match at first, but it's going to be interesting to see how Allen's defense is going to be able to handle players like Landon King. And obviously, vice versa, with Atascocita's defense being able to handle Allen's offense. So that's the big storyline. Because
there aren't too many 6'5" targets left on Allen's schedule. That's certainly a very unique matchup right there. Yeah. As far as kind of game film went, so Atascocita is coming into this. They basically have scrimmaged the last couple weeks. I believe the Woodlands and Klein Collins were who they played, and that was basically the tape that Atascocita and Coach Gamble, when they exchanged tape from their scrimmages. So Allen's scrimmage against Hebron, and then Atascocita's against, I believe it was the Woodlands, was the ones that were swapped. But it's kind of, in a sense, kind of sight unseen, because there are just so many new pieces to this Atascocita team. Devin, what's something that jumps out to you?
I just want to see if this is the Allen teams like you've seen over the last decade, 15 years, in terms of raising their level of play when the stakes are a little bit higher, when the opponent is a little bit more high profile. You look at the game last week against Plano East, 49-26. They were in control, but those are the types of games that a lot of times they win 65-7 type stuff. Now, granted, that's a district game. They're going to be a lot more focused in district. This was non-district. It was the first game of the season after this crazy layoff. But that's one thing that's why Allen's regular season record is so ridiculous, because they have played these high-profile teams from out of state. They have played these big-time programs from Texas, and they tend to take their level of play up a notch to meet those expectations and to rise to the occasion. So, nothing against a 49-26 win, because that was obviously they took care of business. But this is going to be a little bit different challenge, and I want to see if they can kind of, solidify some of those positions. You said they were rotating pretty loosely, so getting a look at a lot of different guys. See if that kind of starting lineup comes together and see what they can do against a top 15 program.
And just how they're going to handle just the expected escalation and just quality of competition, quality of play from an opponent, because, whereas the problems that you see and how you match up with Plano East and what they were able to do, Atascocita is going to reveal an entirely different set of problems for you, just because their personnel is quite a bit different from Plano East. So, anxious to see how Allen handles that. And again, this is the first of 2 consecutive weeks playing state-ranked teams. They have Cedar Hill next week, a team that they have a little bit more experience with, having played them last season and whatnot. But there's just the sense of the unknown with a first-time opponent from an area that you don't traditionally play too many teams from. So, it all kind of shakes out to be a matchup that I think is a guy that's generating a lot of buzz around the state, and hopefully it lives up to the billing. I mean, heck, we're 1 for 1 as far as games of the week, producing just absolute slobber knockers with what happened last week between Plano and McKinney. So, Allen and Atascocita has a pretty tough act to follow. As far as a prediction goes, let's see, Devin, where did you land on this?
Are we giving scores?
It's up to you, man. I'm not, but hey, you can go as deep as you want.
No. I think both teams are going to put points on the board. I think you're probably looking at something in the 30s, but I think it's going to be a close game. I think something where if Allen comes out and sets the tone from the start, I see them being able to jump out to a lead, and Atascocita playing catch up. And Allen's over the years been able to kind of keep those teams at arm's length. I would like to see, just out of curiosity's sake, what happens if, for instance, Atascocita jumps out and grabs a 10-0, 14-0 lead, and see how Allen, especially with a quarterback who's still kind of learning the ropes, no matter who they decide to roll with, handles it. But I see Allen coming out in a close game.
I think I might be wrong, but man, I think I remember Dickinson kind of doing that to Allen last year, where they just kind of cracked him in the mouth. I don't know if you were there for that one. I know you strung a lot of Allen games, but yeah, they just kind of cracked him in the mouth right from the start, and Allen was able to eventually get it together. But yeah, it's very interesting to see if Atascocita just comes out and just goes deep on him or something, and just able to get a big play to start. I'm also leaning Allen as well. I think there is something to be said though for a team that already has a game under its belt and being able to diagnose your strengths and weaknesses, albeit not against a state-ranked opponent, but at least getting something out there as far as being able to play a full game and just getting it all out there to say, okay, this is what we kind of need to correct going forward. And with Atascocita, it's just, I mean, again, you haven't had that. You can only extrapolate so much from a couple scrimmages. And then again, just the dynamic of having to travel all this way and playing in Eagle Stadium and whatnot versus a team that just doesn't lose. They haven't lost in the new Eagle Stadium. They haven't lost a regular season game period since 2012.
Well, and that's one interesting, and this came up over the summer, is we talk about, because we cover games around here in this area in Region 2. The mystique that Allen, we talked about earlier, Allen has a hard time scheduling. Well, they don't have that mystique down in the Houston area. Yeah. Like Galena Park North Shore. That doesn't carry the same weight up here. We know that they're a great team. We know that they're a 2-time state champion, but we don't see them week in, week out against common opponents.
Yeah.
So we know that if we're just going to rattle off state contenders, we'll say Galena Park North Shore, but we don't have that visual image of them like we do of Allen around here. So Atascocita, coming from that different region, they certainly know who Allen is. They've seen the tape, but I don't know if it holds that same mystique that Allen holds over kind of mentally over some of the area teams here.
David, where did you land on this one?
This is going to be a really close game. I think just based on the returners that they got and just the skill positions, it's a pretty evenly matched game right here. Both teams have new starting quarterbacks. But, I mean, just the fact that, like you said, of just having to travel here for 4 hours in a bus, especially with the pandemic where people are staying at home a lot. So just that and just the intimidation of Eagle Stadium right there, I think it's going to be a little bit too much. I think Allen wins maybe like a touchdown or 10 points.
Okay. And there you go. So a projected clean sweep on the picket line for Allen. We'll see. Again, we took our lumps last week in a few of these high profile games. So yes, nevertheless, Allen versus Atascocita, our game of the week, Friday 7:00 at Eagle Stadium. Let's see. We got a few other big games on the docket.
Got four others.
Yeah. Let's chat about them. Let's chat about them and let's make a few picks, some short previews, and just give you an idea as far as what the other big games on the docket are. We got the Carrollton Farmers Branch ISD Super Bowl. Let's see. It's 7:00 at its Standard Stadium. It opens the season for both Creekview and Newman Smith, renewing the rivalry, the best football rivalry going out in CFB ISD. It's just going to be nice for, again, if you're just talking about just after the hectic off season that a lot of these schools have been through, and Creekview and Newman Smith are a very apt example of this because they were one of the school districts that had to temporarily suspend their summer workouts due to county health orders during the summer. So they did not get a typical off season in, and there was a whole lot of scheduling chaos that went down. So despite all that, to come through it all, emerge from that rubble, and then see your the most familiar face that you could expect right across from you, your most storied rival, and get a chance to open up the season against them. It's going to be a nice sense of normalcy out there at Standard Stadium between the Mustangs and the Trojans. As far as what it actually means in terms of a competitive game, this is a series that, at least in recent years, has favored Newman Smith. They were riding I believe 3 consecutive wins up until last year. Then Creekview got the better of them in their regular season finale. I want to say 23-7. I don't have the score in front of me right now.
23-6.
23-6. Wow, 1 point off. But nevertheless, kind of looking at where these two are at, there's a bit more, I guess, consistency as far as returning experience goes with Newman Smith, especially at quarterback with Doug Hill back. With Creekview, they run that tricky little flex bone offense. They got a few key pieces that they have to fill in that, specifically at quarterback, and then but they do feel pretty confident with what they have at running back, and Edgar Page, who is kind of stepping into that go-to role at running back and is expected to really kind of carry a big load for them this season. I ended up siding with Creekview. I think it'll be a much closer game than last year, and then you have to obviously apply it with the caveat of this being the first game for both teams, and the expected rust that's going to come with that. But ultimately, I think that again, I think Newman Smith's the experience that they have returning, and it sounds like they got a couple move-ins that they're pretty optimistic about as well. But I think it'll close the gap a bit. But I think I like Creekview by a touchdown or so. Let's see, Devin, where did you land on this one?
I laid it about the same. I took Creekview, not having much knowledge at all, background knowledge of either team. I know there are teams that have struggled. Mm-hmm. I guess neither one's made the playoffs since 2015. But it's early season, and you mentioned the first game, but it's also a chance to build momentum.
Yeah.
And when you haven't had success like these two programs, I think Creekview went 4-6 last year. So it's not like they're coming off 0-10 campaigns. But when you don't know how to win, every win counts in terms of building and learning how to do that. And you see some teams that are able to turn things around, and they do so through the non-district part of the schedule, where all of a sudden you look up and they're unexpectedly 2-0 or 3-0, and now all of a sudden they have this element they didn't have back in August, or in this case September, which is confidence. So, I think it's kind of a big game, not just being a crosstown rivalry game, but I think it's a big game just toward kind of laying foundation. But I think Creekview, based on last year's game where they were able to put the clamps, you mentioned a couple transfers, but they've yet to hit the field. Mm-hmm. So I have Creekview by 10.
Okay. Let's see. It was unanimous. We are all in concert in thinking that Creekview takes care of Newman Smith as part of the latest. I don't know if there's a name for that rivalry. I feel like I should know that if there is, but not that I know of. But yes, Creekview and Newman Smith, 7 o'clock, Standard Stadium, Friday night. Let's see. Let's move on to our next game. We got Sachse playing its first game of the season, and they get a team kind of like Allen Atascocita, a team that already has a game under its belt, that being Coppell. This one is going to be at Buddy Eccles Field out in Coppell, 7 o'clock kickoff. Again, this is kind of like last week when Coppell played Mesquite. You guys cover these schools, not me, so I'm going to sit back and shut up and let you guys preview this one. Let's see, David, just talk a little about Coppell and just what's got your interest on them heading into this one.
Well, just the thing that got me about Coppell is just their continuity that they have, especially on offense. A lot of returning starters coming back from last year, especially at the skill positions right there. And then you saw it in that game last week, which Devin was at last week. They, got up 16-0 in the first quarter right there, and went up to beat Mesquite, and a Mesquite team that went to the playoffs last year. So, and obviously the big thing is just their running game, and also obviously the wide receivers that they got. KJ Liggins, he had a great first game back after being a Denton guy. He had 5 catches for 101 yards, and obviously the offense moved pretty smoothly with quarterback Ryan Walker, who threw for 225 yards. So I think that obviously is going to give Coppell a little bit of edge, especially because Sachse's bringing in a brand new quarterback this year. Because I believe Parker Wells transferred to Allen.
You did.
So just based on that factor, and also I think this is a Coppell team that seems it's went through some struggles last year with a lot of new talent. Lost a lot of close games, but I think like all this, including Sachse, which Sachse won 33-30, and Coppell actually had a 16-0 lead in that game. So I think just going through those struggles and learning how to win, I think it's going to show on Friday where Coppell's learned from like those losses last year, and I think Coppell's going to probably win by at least 10 points. What should
people be expecting out of Sachse in this opener, Devin?
That's a question I'm not even sure their coaching staff can answer right now. It's not just the fact that Coppell does have a game under its belt this season. It's the fact that Sachse, Coppell returned 14 starters. I saw them last week. They looked pretty crisp for a season opener. Sachse, though, they were expected to return just a handful of starters. And then you mentioned the transfer bug. Parker Wells goes to Allen. Well, then Sean Coleman, they still got a 1,200-yard rusher that's coming back. Oh, he transferred to Dallas Christian.
Oh, he's at DC now. Okay.
Yes. So they are basically breaking in an entirely new offense and an entirely new defense. They have one returning starter on defense, so a lot of new faces. Alec Orji is expected to be their starting quarterback. He's got a good pedigree. His two older brothers were stars at Rockwall, and now play at Vanderbilt. He himself has kind of gone through the transfer, started at Rockwall, then went to Bishop Dunn. Now he's over at Sachse. So I think it's going to take him some time to acclimate. They do have Brian Okoye coming back in the backfield, who was Coleman's backup last year, but got a lot more snaps, got a lot more carries as the season progressed. Even had a 100-yard game late in the year last year, averaged better than 7 yards a carry. They have a solid offensive line, which will help, and that's the one area they do have some experience in. But they don't have – I was reading down their list of wide receivers, and nothing rang a bell from last year. It was just kind of going, all right. So that's obviously the passing game is going to take a while to come around. They always have good athletes on defense. They've always been able to fly to the ball. But, again, it's just a matter of getting those guys to fill the positions. It's going to be a tough challenge, but it's going to be a good one. If recent history indicates anything, 2 years ago, Coppell wins 38-28 when Caden Davis kicks the 57-yard field goal as time expires.
Right. Remember that game.
to win it, and then Sachse kind of turns the tables on them last year. David mentioned they were down 16-0. Sachse comes back and really dominates that game through the second and third quarters. Coppell returns a kickoff, with a minute and a half left to close the 33-30, and then Sachse is able to, return an onside kick and run out the clock. Just looking at the numbers, I would say Coppell wins this game by 2 touchdowns. But I also, Sachse's been able to find ways and to, this has been a close game the last 2 years. I still give Coppell the slight nod, especially, and I have recency bias having seen them last week. But I think it's going to be close enough. I think it's going to be a one-score game. I'm
really anxious to see what Sachse can do at quarterback with Orji, just given the track record of that system with dual-threat quarterbacks especially, and they seem to do a really good job of capitalizing on those strengths. So I'm anxious to see what his, especially just given the, just the prestige in that family and just some of the athletes that they've produced. I think they're still going to be up for a pretty solid season regardless of the outcome of Friday's game. But yes, the picket line, though, however, does foresee Sachse dropping to 0-1. The three of us were in unison and picking Coppell to get the win on Friday. Let's see, then we can go out to Mesquite for a 7:30 kickoff from Mesquite Memorial Stadium in the latest rivalry between Poteet and West Mesquite, a matchup that will not have any sort of district ramification for the first time, and you can answer this, Devin, probably for quite some time. They've now been split apart by Division I and Division II and 5A, but nevertheless, though, the rivalry does stay intact, kind of like Creekview and Newman Smith. But nevertheless, Devin, I'll leave the floor to you, man. Just talk a bit about this game and where you're leaning.
Yeah, first time in forever. So this is a rivalry that started in 1990, and they've always been linked. It's always been a close series. It's odd because it's a series of runs. You had West had an 8-game winning streak, and Poteet's had a couple 6-game. But when it all adds up, Poteet leads the series 16-14. A lot of questions to be answered in this game because, Poteet is just in its second year under Roddy McClain out there. West Mesquite in his first season under Frank Sandoval. They both had some positives last week. Poteet was hanging right with Lake Highlands. This 21-20 game, and then all of a sudden you blink and it's 49-20. And they're out of it. West Mesquite went on the road to play Waco, a game that they led for a while. And then Waco's able to rally late, and they lose 32-23. It's right now. You look at it. It's as far as strength against strength. West Mesquite again is breaking in a new system. They got a lot of new names on offense, so they're a work in progress. But they did return 8 starters on defense, and that defense played well against Waco for a lot of the game, and that happens to match up with what's on Poteet's strength, which is their offense. Jalen Police is a returning starter at quarterback. He threw for 300 yards last week. Xavion Jeans is an effective running back who was, in effect, a starter last year, with all the injury problems they had in the backfield. Didn't really have any receivers returning of note, but Marcel Jackson goes out there in the first game and has 6 catches for 129. Deshaun Turner had a nice game with 5 catches for 96. Charles Bradley had a 40-yard touchdown catch. So they had guys that kind of stepped up, and it looked like they can be reliable targets. I think this is an offense that can score in the 30s on a consistent basis. West Mesquite, it's kind of hard to say. Like I said, a lot of new faces. Jay Cipriano got to start last week. Solid debut, threw for 260 yards and 2 touchdowns. Devin Duncan and Eric Tennyson both had touchdown grabs, and Bryson Walker had a touchdown on the ground. The problem is, and this is kind of what happens with a young offense, they did have 5 turnovers, and that was the difference in that game. So, I think it's going to be close. I do give Poteet the edge just because of proven talent. Really curious to see West Mesquite. I always like to see, a first-year head coach and just see how different a team looks from one year to the next, not just in the personnel, but just in the way they kind of, in their mindset and their confidence.
Absolutely.
And even the pregame, you can kind of sense a difference because you're trying to change a culture. So excited to get out there on Friday at Mesquite Memorial and see West Mesquite for the first time. Prove me wrong, Wranglers, but right now I'm going with Poteet in a close game.
Is that kind of where you're really on this one too, David?
Yeah, I'm on the same lines as Devin right there. Just the experience that Poteet's got. I mean, that should give them the edge over a team that's bringing in a brand new coach and a brand new system. So I'd say Poteet by at least a touchdown.
Yep, that was kind of in line there too. Just going with the more proven commodity right now. So we'll see. But yes, picket line once again. A lot of unanimity on this one, with everybody picking Poteet to beat West Mesquite. There was a difference, though, in this last game. And this one is probably, right up there with Allen and Atascocita is probably the most anticipated game in our coverage area, at least. Heck, maybe in the area. This is one that the second it was announced, you were just kind of rubbing your hands together and, okay, let's see what happens. Frisco Lone Star is heading out to play mighty Aledo. This a 7:30 p.m. kickoff from Bearcat Stadium. Lone Star looking to shake off the whatever happened last week against North Forney, an unexpected upset. The state's number 2 ranked team in 5A Division I, falling by the wayside. Just a very uncharacteristic performance on all fronts in a 34-31 loss to a solid North Forney team, no doubt, a state-ranked North Forney team. So it's not like they lost to any chump or anything. But obviously, though, you turn right around and now you're playing against. Devin, you were looking up some numbers on what might honestly be maybe pound for pound the best high school football program in the state.
Yeah, and I'll just throw some of these. When you think of, and we're not talking about historical, teams that have won, multiple decades. We're talking about like the last, say, 15, 20 years and teams that jump to mind. And I was just kind of going through and looking at Aledo and looking at some of these other groups. Aledo since 2009 is 161-10. That is their record. That is insane. It's
to put it mildly.
You look at Katy. Katy's, from 1997 to 2008, that's a 12-year span. They won 161 games, but they lost 15. But a lot of people look at Katy as kind of the gold standard, especially out of the Houston area. South Lake Carroll, who was the team to beat for so long, and they were 79-1 over a 5-year period. For their best 11-year streak, they were 147-14. Still incredible, but not quite what Aledo was able to do. Allen, who we just talked about earlier. Last 11 years, same 11-year span, 147-10, same number of losses, just incredible. But 5 state titles during that time?
For Allen, yes.
Yes. But that's the difference, I think, between Aledo and those other teams, where they give them a slight nod. 8 state championships in the last 11 years, 10 losses in 11 years, and 8 state titles. It's just incredible. So that was. They kind of have that mystique, same as Allen. Who wants to play Aledo? Well, Lone Star does, because Lone Star is a young program that's been on the rise. Heck, they're 70-10 in their last 6 seasons.
Oh, yeah.
And they look at Aledo as a challenge, and they also look at them as, hey, this is where we want to be. This is where we want to take our program. So I have a good feeling that game against North Forney is so far in the rearview mirror for them. They're going to come out. You could convince me they might have had an eye turned toward this before North Forney even.
That is possible.
You could convince me of that.
That is possible.
But I just, and I'll let you, I know y'all have looked at some of it as well, some of the numbers. It's shaping up. It's going to be a heavyweight fight, and I think there's going to be a lot of points scored.
We got to remember, too, that even for how good Aledo's been, Lone Star's had some pretty good victories along the way, too. If last year they went to Highland Park.
Yeah.
How hard is it to win at Highland Park?
It's damn near impossible.
So, Lone Star has proven that they can go into hostile environments and win. So, just after the bitter taste of defeat last week, and this is a Lone Star program. The only time that they've ever started the season with 2 wins is their first season in 2010.
2 losses, you mean?
Two losses to start the season.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is this is going to be interesting to see how Lone Star handles this adversity right there. Like, they're used to winning so much, but, I mean, after last week, I'm pretty sure they're pretty fired up to go play Aledo.
Yeah,
So,
I don't. Garrett Rangel's not going to throw for 201 yards again. I mean, that's. There's too many weapons around him. I think they get that offense going. You know, it's going to come down to their defense. Their defense was opportunistic last week. I mean, they had 2 pick sixes. Jane Rios and Noah Bolton both had interception returns, but that just kind of puts in perspective. They scored 31, and 2 of those were on pick sixes. That Lone Star is not going to score 14 very often ever, especially with Garrett Rangel. But again, it's their defense. You look over at Aledo, and I don't know if you looked at the stats closely or not, but they started at sophomore Brent Hayden at quarterback. Okay, 10 for 15. 10 completions for 271 yards and 3 touchdowns. So he averages 27 yards of completion, and then he was resting by the third quarter because they blew out Weatherford, 70-7. They just have, JoJo Earl, 6 catches for 169 yards and a couple touchdowns. He had 2 carries, and both of those went for touchdowns. They just have so many different guys, and they're scoring on huge plays. I mean, long plays. That's going to be a real fun game to watch, and there's going to be a lot of fireworks.
And obviously, it's a different Weatherford team than it was a year ago because they lost their quarterback, Ken Seals, who's now at Vanderbilt. So, I mean, obviously, I think we expected Aledo to, kind of handle Weatherford, especially with a brand new starting quarterback right there. And obviously, they played with heavy hearts in that game, too, because I think they lost their sports editor in that town, too, unfortunately.
Oh, did they? Oh.
So I think they were kind of playing with a heavy heart that night, too. But I think this is going to be a game where, if Frisco Lone Star can start fast, I think that's going to be huge.
So where are you guys leaning on this one? Obviously, it sounds like we're pretty fired up for this game. So what's the pick? Devin.
I chose Lone Star.
Okay.
I mean, despite the fact that last week they lost. We talked to the podcast on Monday. They went against. Number one, they went against one of the best coaching staffs in the state with Randy Jackson out there, and I've talked about Coach Jackson for years and what his ability when he has time to prepare. And they had plenty of time to prepare, and people are going to have off weeks. I just think that this Lone Star team is too good. And one of the points was David brought up the Highland Park game last year. They've shown the ability to rise to the academy. They're going, and this is in Aledo, but they go into Highland. There's nothing tougher than going into Highlander Stadium and coming out with a win. So, I think that they're gonna be able to bounce back from last week. I think they've probably already forgotten about last week. They've had this one circled for months. Aledo's had this one circled for months. So, it's gonna be fun. But I have Lone Star in a high scoring game.
Got you, David. Where'd you lean?
This is not going to be a 70-7 game right here.
No, hope not. That would be quite striking.
I think this is going to be a game where both the teams are going to score at least in the 30s. And I think Aledo is going to win by at least a touchdown or 10 points, just based on the experience that they're playing at home, and they have just that factor of JoJo Earl. He's such a huge weapon.
Absolutely. That might be up until they play Denton Ryan and Jatavian Sanders and all those guys. I mean, that might be the best, pound for pound, the best pure football player that they see up until that point. Let's see. As far as where I lean on this one, I can't get out of and this is going to be the ultimate test of just, the coaching cliche of just a short-term memory. Just how much can they just wipe the hard drive from last week and just flush that game and, again, focus on what could be a chance for them to really kind of, again, get that taste out of their mouths and really reassert themselves as the state powerhouse that I think they're, we kind of fancied them to be this season, especially with what they accomplished last week. I don't think it happens, though. Again, maybe it's just because I don't know. If they had won last week, I don't know if I'd be picking them either. But there's just something about only scoring 17 points, not being able to win a game where you had 2 pick sixes, and again, not even being able to creep over 17 points with the talent that they have. I know that they're better than that for sure, and I'm sure that they will show that in some sense on Friday. It feels like there's just so much that I don't know. There's just so much about that game was just the Lone Star that I don't come to expect. I mean, the big plays that they allowed, with Cam Allen and Tyler Tucker getting loose there early on, and just the lack of execution, and in a first and goal at the 1 yard, not a first and goal, but it's a fourth and goal at the 1 yard line and getting stuffed. It was just, I don't know. This is the one thing about starting a brand new season is we always have to kind of remember that whatever you did last year, it really doesn't matter because just everything has changed. What they did against Highland Park last year, that was incredible. Marvin Mims ain't walking through that door though. It's a brand new team with a brand new set of strengths and weaknesses and, problems that they have to solve early on in the season. And I feel like there were just one too many that were flushed to light last week against a team like Aledo, which is about as well-oiled a machine as there is. And it's just, I don't know, it's just, if this game was happening maybe in a few weeks for them to iron the stuff out, then I'd feel a lot better about picking them. But obviously for this one, though, I'm just not sure the turnaround is enough for them to get everything correct that they'll need to in order to pull off a win in a place that's notoriously very difficult to win. I know Geyer went up there and won, I believe last season, and that was the first time, I guess 4 or 5 years that a team had won at Bearcat Stadium. But I don't know. I side with Aledo in this one, but I think it'll be a spirited one, probably in the neighborhood of like 10 to 14 points or so. So there you go. A little bit of dissension. Me and David siding with Aledo, Devin picking Lone Star. Hope it's a great game. Hope it lives up to the hype. This one, if this was game of the week, I would have totally got it too, because this one should be an absolute barn burner of a football game. And yes, that is a look at some of the marquee games that are in our coverage area. As far as the games that we will actually be out and covering this week, David, what is on your coverage docket for Thursday and Friday?
Thursday, I'm going to be back at Toyota Stadium.
Yeah, it's coming a home away from home for you.
I know. I might as well just get a bunk bed over there. It's going to be Lake Dallas at Frisco Centennial right there. Mm-hmm. Obviously, Lake Dallas is coming off a really impressive win against Denton their first week. And so it's just interesting to see how their defense carries over that performance from last week when they allowed only 100 yards of offense and only 3 points, which came on almost like as a result of a turnover at the end of the first half. Mm-hmm. And so it'll be interesting to see how they do. Obviously, I'm still trying to learn about Centennial a little bit more.
For sure.
So it's gonna be good to kind of see what Centennial has this year. So and it's another non-district game to kind of get both teams prepared for district.
How about Friday?
Friday, I am going to be at Coppell.
That's right. We just talked about that game. Coppell and Sachse.
Coppell and Sachse, yep.
Devin, how about you, man? Your Thursday plans took a bit of a hit. But
yeah, Thursday is a little bit more up in the air. I'm still trying to sort out details. Everything was so hammered out, personal-wise, professional-wise. I was going to do Rowlett and Plano over at Homer B. Johnson Stadium. But for those who haven't heard, Rowlett had a positive COVID-19 case early this week at the school. And by GISD rules, they went ahead and canceled the game on Thursday. And they also postponed their district opener against Sachse, scheduled for next Friday with a mandatory 14-day quarantine. So we got a little bit of a reshuffling for Rowlett football-wise. We hope everybody is healthy and getting better over there. But as far as actual coverage that I know about, I will be out at Mesquite Memorial on Friday for the 31st installment of Poteet and West Mesquite. A game again that I alluded to earlier that has a lot of question marks, but it should be very interesting. These two rivals always go at it. So, again, that should be a fun game to kind of see how that plays out and just kind of give you a preview of how their prospective district seasons are going to go.
For my coverage schedule Thursday, I'll be out at Pennington Field in Euless for Prosper, visiting mighty Euless Trinity. A nice little test for Prosper after scoring Preston would give him a game last week. That was a bit of a back-and-forth game for about 3.5 quarters. Prosper was able to, though, pull away, behind a strong game from quarterback Jackson Berry. A bit of a step up, though, in difficulty, though. Obviously, Trinity's reputation is well documented, and just those bruising offensive lines they have and just that rugged ground-and-pound style of theirs. So it'll definitely be a much, much different look from what they saw against Prestonwood. So that's where I will be on Thursday. And then Friday, I will be out at Eagle Stadium in Allen for the site of our game of the week, as talked about in length earlier, Allen versus Atascocita. Looking forward to that one. Should be a fun game. So yes, that's what we got on the docket, and that is it, folks. That'll do it for this episode of the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast. Let's see. We'll be back on Monday to recap all the fun happenings from Week 2, and yeah, guys, we'll see what happens. Should be a fun one. Until then, folks, take care. We'll talk to y'all later.